This is ThinkTech Talks, broadcasting here on Monday afternoon. Today we're going to talk about Kaka'ako, which is one of our very favorite subjects, with one of our very favorite ThinkTech hosts, Charlie Willson. It would appear that Kaka'ako is one of the biggest issues going on, at least in Oahu and maybe in the state. In fact, our OC16 show, which is running right now, is entitled the Finding a Future in Kaka'ako, How to Assuage the Concerns. Indeed, there is substantial unrest, despite the fact that the Honolulu Community Development Authority did deny an application for increased height at 803 for the 803 Waimanu Street project. In any event, there's a lot of discussion by local residents in that area and by others in the legislature and the city council who are interested in what's going on in Kaka'ako about height, about density, about realizing a reasonable plan, and a lot of concern about how HCDA has operated and is operating. And there are people on both sides of the questions. Others feel that we ought to just go ahead already and not hold up, that it's been 30, 35 years since HCDA was tasked with developing Kaka'ako. Why don't we do it already? So Charlie has set up for a show today, but his guest wasn't able to make it, so he's standing in as his own guest. I like that. Thank you, Charlie. That's very reasonable of you.
Not exactly what was planned.
Not exactly what was planned, but Charlie had done, as he always does, a lot of homework on these things, and so we want to get the benefit of his homework and his knowledge about the Kaka'ako Master Plan, which is at issue in the hearings and discussions between the neighborhood, the community, so to speak, and HCDA. So Charlie, tell us, what is the Kaka'ako Master Plan? How did it originate? What is its status today?
Well, first of all, let's back up for a second, because for those of you who are watching this and may be interested in what's going on, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's been a lot of proposals that are floated and changes, proposed variances, modifications, and things that would not normally be allowed for most normal development. There is going to be a town meeting, which is jointly sponsored by a number of those in the state legislature and in the city council, and this will be.
What's a town meeting?
Well, a town meeting allows people to get together in one room, and the assumption is that HCDA will be present and be able to update us on exactly what's requested and exactly what's planned. The problem is that much of this information dribbles out in little bits and pieces here, so the public doesn't really have a solid, comprehensive idea of exactly what's included in the plan. And to be honest, neither do I. So the town meeting is intended to update people. So
when is that?
The town meeting is coming up on Tuesday, July 30th, and it's going to take place in the State Capitol Auditorium, and that will be between 5:30 and 7:30. So if you have Tuesday, July 30th, if you have a little time available and you want to come down and see what's going on in the State Capitol Auditorium, that's at the lower level, between 5:30 and 7:30. The last meeting I went to, it was fairly packed.
Well, the one we went to make this movie, about the application for 803 Waimanu Street, it was totally packed. You'll see when you can look at our program on OC16, which is playing all through this week, about finding a future in Kaka'ako, and the HCDA headquarters, which is at the intersection of, I think it's, well, it's on Cook Street there. And it's a sort of a brand new facility they've got. They used to be over across in the Gold Bond building. It was packed. There were people spilling out of the meeting rooms and then out of the office in general onto the street. They were everywhere, and they were a very broad cross section of people in and around Kaka'ako. Anyway, so there's a huge amount of interest in this. And
huge interest.
We ought to spend a little time trying to figure out why there is so much interest. What generated all this all this interest and to some extent animosity?
Well, some of this is because it's kind of snuck up on us. I mean, there was an environmental impact statement done, but that was done in 2008. So now, I mean, we're 5 years down the road, and all of a sudden plans are moving forward, and it does not follow the normal plan of progression here. It doesn't follow the normal process. Normally, the county is overseeing all of this. The county is looking at compliance with development rules. Normally this requires them to look at street setbacks, street widths, landscaping, density, building heights, things like that.
Well, I know there's a lot of people who feel that HCDA should not be the agency that makes the decisions on this, because it is not the Department of Planning and Permitting of the city, which has great experience, depth of expertise on exactly how you process applications for development and construction. And I don't know if you could say that they're great at planning communities, but to the extent that anybody's planning communities, they have been doing that. HCDA has not. And so I think there's a level of concern that has been expressed that HCDA should not be the one. One guy made an interesting comment, and it's in our movie. He said, well, they should make recommendations. HCDA should make recommendations, but the Department of Planning and Permitting, should actually make the decision. Others feel that the whole process should be taken out of HCDA's hands and put in the city, and there's really no need for HCDA after all these years. Anyway, I just wanted to add that, but I think that's one of the reasons that people are wired about this.
It's a matter of consistency also.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we're talking about a major action here, and the authorities that are normally applied, the people who are normally reviewing development plans, all of a sudden are more or less out of the loop. And what we're talking about here is a 5-fold increase in population. I mean, right now, I believe the last census we had a little over 6,000 people in the Kaka'ako area.
Define it. What area are we talking about?
We're talking about the area between downtown and Ala Moana Center, generally. Okay. Now, right now, there's a lot of smaller shops there. There's some residences. There are places like auto shops and gyms and parking lots and parks. And to a certain extent, because we've known for a while that there are long-term plans for the area hasn't really gotten a proper upgrade. And the whole transit-oriented development, you'll see TOD mentioned in the papers. And so when they say TOD, quote unquote, that means transit-oriented development. This is giving them an opportunity as part of the rail project to say, hey, how would we redesign this area and basically take a large area and make this kind of a comprehensive plan, so you do the whole thing at once.
Yeah.
That gets away from kind of piecemeal planning. So there's some advantages there.
But there's some resistance on that, because
Exactly.
they say that I think they call it's a layering process. HCDA made rules, made a plan of some kind. They had everybody come in and talk about it, and they finally settled on something. Then you got the TOD overlay that changed all that, including increased heights permitted. And so people really didn't like that too much. The other element about this, which rides a similar path, is on the infrastructure. A lot of local residents have complained for years about the infrastructure. I mean, before any of these 22 buildings were actually announced, that the sewer infrastructure and all kinds of infrastructure wasn't really up to their expectations, even though HCDA's primary mission was to make sure that the infrastructure was built up in anticipation of development, which was supposed to happen. Well, their claim, their position is that it's bad not to have adequate infrastructure, but it's much worse to build 22 buildings without providing for additional infrastructure to support the 22 buildings. And that's one of the other reasons I think they're wired about this.
Exactly. Well, we need to be looking at several different interrelated systems. We need to be looking at water supply. Right now, there's no excess of water, and we're actually running down the water a little bit, and there's a meniscus below the island. Well, there's a layer between the salt water at the bottom, then there's some brackish water in between, and then there's a purer water up top, which can be used for drinking water.
Can you tell people what a meniscus is? It's really
Okay.
important they understand this, not only for Kaka'ako, but for the way the water works here in Oahu.
Okay, well, let's back up just a little bit. The water supply on Oahu, unlike, say, Maui, comes from underground sources. Okay, we're pulling up groundwater, and that water is recharged by rainfall. Rainfalls comes down from the mountains, and it collects in the low areas, and it percolates into the soil. For the most part, that's a natural process. There's a natural recharge there. However, you get to a point when you start pumping more water than you have available. Now, if you think of this as three general layers, and I'm going to oversimplify a little bit, you have a top layer where you have water which is generally fresh, pure
That
water.
came from the mountains.
Right. Doesn't require a whole bunch of treatment. Okay. Basically, this is pure water, can be pulled out and consumed. Now, this is unlike, say, if you lived on Maui County, and most of your water there is going to be surface water. That's water that's collected after a rainfall, and it's running downstream.
You're absolutely right about that. I know.
Right.
I looked into that, and I wrote an article about it. You're absolutely right about that.
So on some islands, we're collecting kind of water on the fly. It doesn't really recharge into the system. So on Maui, for instance, you have to worry about surface water because it can be contaminated quite easily. It carries a certain amount of dirt and debris with it, which is a concern because now that has to be filtered out, which is a big process. Also, in the soil, because there are animals living there, you get concerns with things like leptospirosis, cryptosporidium, which is particularly difficult to kill off, giardia, things like that. When they've had a surface water system, at one point when I worked on some Maui projects for water supply, I interviewed people who lived in an area, and they were getting only the simplest of treatment, just basically chlorine.
Risky
at the time.
business. Risky
Right.
business.
And it would not always kill everything off. And so I was talking to people whose kids who had problems. Anyway.
Now, what about below the meniscus?
Okay, now, so on Oahu, we have a top layer of relatively pure water, which can be pumped out and used with minimal work. At the bottom, we have a layer that's basically salt water that's infused from the ocean. In between, we have kind of a mixing layer, and toward the top, it's relatively fresh, and as you go lower, it
more
gets
salty.
saltier.
Yeah.
Right. So the meniscus is the section that's in between the freshwater layer and the saltwater layer.
It's not
Now,
very thick, though, right? This is where they meet.
Oh, I would be hard pressed to tell you just how thick it is.
Okay.
I'm not really a specialist in the area, but we can find that out if you need to know. The concern is that over time we run down the amount of fresh water that's available, and in a period of climate change, we have to look at what's here in the long-term future. Whenever you plan a project, you're looking at commitments to long-term actions here. And
So, and it's a delicate balance you're describing. This whole affair with the fresh water and the meniscus and the seawater, the salt water under that, that's delicate. And if you damage it on any scale, then it's very hard to repair the damage.
that would be a problem. And also, if you start looking at the other options, such as purifying water, that gets pretty expensive.
Yeah, we're going to take a break, Charlie. I hope you don't mind.
That's okay.
That's Charlie Willson. He's one of our ThinkTech hosts on Monday afternoon. This is his show, actually. I'm just standing in for
should be the
him
guest,
while
Mr.
he stands in for the guest. This is ThinkTech Talks, or more specifically, what is it? Island Perspectives is the title of Charlie's show. We'll be right back after this break. This is ThinkTech, back again with Island Perspectives here on a Monday, and Charlie Willson, our host on a Monday, who's actually turned into our guest on a Monday. But he's very knowledgeable. Let me assure you, Charlie is knowledgeable no matter what he talks about. He always does his homework for these shows, so I'm kind of taking advantage of his level of expertise and knowledge. And we're talking about the master plan for Kaka'ako, which is really a critical piece right now. It's the center, really, of the city. It's a gap, it's a puka in the city, and there are various developers and community issues, and we have got to solve them and get by them in order to proceed with the development that is contemplated. There are 22 buildings on the block here. There are meetings going on with the Hawaii Community Development Authority, and there's a lot of groups that have formed up to express concerns. So we called our show on OC16 this week, dealing with the same subject, Finding a Future in Kaka'ako, how to assuage community concerns to deal with this unrest. So anyway, Charlie, before the break, we were talking about, the situation, sort of laying the landscape for
Infrastructure.
In order to discuss more completely the Kaka'ako Master Plan itself. So tell us more.
Well, let me finish on infrastructure here, because there's several other components here. Sewer upgrades. There have been some ongoing sewer upgrades here. So although I haven't looked at the real capacity of the system and whether or not they have to put in parallel lines or whatever, the sewer probably is not that likely to fail in the area. Water supply, similarly, I don't look at that as being a real big problem. We need to talk about traffic. But before I get to there, let's back up just a second, because there's also electrical upgrades. Now, the electrical upgrades, I don't expect is likely to be a problem, but we have another thing that we haven't really thought out fully enough. Unlike every other state, Hawaii relies on fossil fuels for its power generation, and fossil fuel prices have been bouncing around a little bit. And right now, because there has been a significant change in the way that we drill for oil, we've got a lot more natural gas available on the mainland, we've got a lot more oil available. And I don't want to get into it in a technical sense here, but basically the situation is that when you find pockets of oil in geologic strata, you have generally a narrow pocket where the oil is found. It has to be between certain depths. It has to have been there for a certain length of time at a certain temperature. And then this liquid sunshine, so to speak. This is sunshine that has been collected in plant matter and organic matter over eons. And
you're not suggesting we found oil here in Oahu? Because that would be great diversification, Charlie.
It would be great, but I mean, we can go back to our discussion on fusion power here and how to create our own liquid fuels. But the problem right now is that when we are in a state where we rely on fossil fuels, if there's a price disruption, we have major problems. If there's any kind of major disruption, we end up with not only cost problems, because that's where we feel it first, in the pocketbook.
Why is this specific to Kaka'ako, though?
Okay, it's not specific to the entire island. However, when you start talking about the density we're looking at here, we have about 6,000 people in the area as of the last census, and we're looking at a population that will exceed 20,000 people. I mean, going from 6,000 from 6,000 to 30,000, and we'll be doing it by 2030. Okay, we're talking about an awful lot of people. When you have a potential for losing power, electric power supply, the electric power is required to pump your water, to flush your toilet, to process the sewage as it comes out, to run your elevators. I mean, we're talking about buildings, and some of these towers have been proposed at 650 to 700 feet. Okay, now I don't know if these get approved that way, if they go all the way, but that's the present proposal. We're trying to put the maximum density on the minimum amount of land. Now, what happens if you lose electric power? What
Okay.
happens if you don't have power? Now, I know everybody's talking about alternative energy. Everybody's looking at, wind power, putting a line between the islands
Sure.
to pull in wind
Well,
power.
I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon.
Looking at
But
solar power, but the problem is the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. Okay, well, by sun doesn't always shine. What I'm saying is, when a cloud goes over, all of a sudden your electricity generation from photovoltaic cells drops off radically. When the wind stops blowing, the power drops radically there. So there's a limit to how much of these alternative
so we have a
energy
certain
sources.
fragility about this.
Yes.
So the question is, again, how does this play out in Kaka'ako as opposed to other places?
Well, we're talking about putting an awful lot of people in a very small space. And when that happens, you have to have the power to keep the water flowing, to keep the sewage handled, to keep the elevators running. When this no longer occurs, if you have a power shutdown, you have a major, major problem. You have to get food to these people, you have to get water to these people.
Stuck up on the 30th floor or something.
Right.
And,
Well, I mean, the thing is, you can walk down. Well, not everybody, perhaps.
not everybody can walk down, and then.
Right, but the thing is, you have to have water. Okay, so we're looking at a system which becomes increasingly brittle. I like this statement. When you design brittle systems, it's more likely that something can fail, and we do not have fault-tolerant systems. So we design a system which is more at risk. I'm not saying that that's totally improper. I'm saying we need to go into this with our eyes open.
Yeah, I understand. So what
Okay.
you're saying now is that because we have this level of density, which would exceed any level of density the state has ever seen,
Yes.
we have to have infrastructure that has that kind of resilience.
Yes.
And we shouldn't have to worry about horrible things happening if it fails, whatever it is.
We should be designing resilient systems.
Resilient systems.
That are not prone to failure. And that includes, we have to be looking at long-term climate change impacts. We have to look at what happens if we have further
Should be
earthquakes.
very smart.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
so now here we are at the Kaka'ako Master Plan.
All
Where
right.
did it come from and how smart is it?
Okay. Well, we have various rules that have been promulgated along the way. If you Google for it, you should be able to find a 2008 environmental assessment. We have a set of rules that were passed in 2005, some other rules that came out in 2000.
This was by HCDA or under its auspices?
I believe that it all came through them, but I would suggest that people attend the town meeting to get the hardcore details. I'm not going to go into too many specifics there.
Okay.
But then we have the transit-oriented design
On top of
overlay.
that's the overlay.
Right
It's
here.
interesting. Overlay really means
Right.
it overtakes. It changes things.
Yeah.
Whatever existed before the overlay.
Right.
What's the word? It
The
drives everything.
Right. The idea being that when you have a transit line coming through, you want your density as close as possible to the stops to get people moved efficiently. And so you want to maximize your density around the areas where you have rail stops.
Okay. And you
Now-
want to put in retail and businesses and services
Right.
that people will want.
Which now also kind of links these systems together in a way that is, again, some additional risk.
Okay.
Again, I'm not saying it's an
Well,
unacceptable risk.
because
I'm
of the
saying it's-
the density rather.
Yes, okay. So, we have different sets of rules. We don't fully understand that. Hopefully we'll find out more when we go to the town meeting on July 30th. Now, while we're on the topic here of infrastructure, we need to look at traffic getting in and out. Now, I
Now,
thought
there's just a footnote to that is that a lot of people have expressed concern. This is the concerned group, if you will, that already the traffic in Kaka'ako is getting more intense, perhaps, than they expected. And when you put in the 22 buildings, it'll be way more intense than that. And steps have to be taken. And there's this complete, I hope you discussed this, the Complete Streets initiative is supposed to be going into the development of Kaka'ako and how that will affect things.
Well, there's a number of kind of overlapping discussions here. I thought of this in particular 2 days ago. I try to avoid driving in and out of Kaka'ako during rush hour, but I got stuck coming back from the dentist and tried to come down Queen Street, which tends to be a bit of a loser if you're doing it right around 5 to 5:30.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It locks up kind of solid sometimes because it feeds into Nimitz Highway.
Yeah.
And I said, I made a mistake. So I managed to get off the road and get over to Nimitz Highway, which was also slowed down. Now, when you talk about this from a planner's perspective, there's another term of art here called level of service, okay? And if you see this in the documentation, they usually, say LOS, and then it'll have a grade after it, and it looks like you're being graded in high school or something, A through F, okay? Level of service F is like when you're sitting there and it seems like forever for the traffic to move, and it just crawls.
That's an F.
Okay. Level of service A means basically you're flying through there, there's no slowdown. Well, I was coming back through Kaka'ako on Friday, and I looked at the amount of traffic there, and it was pretty near a standstill in several places here. This is what I would call.
This is not on Nimitz, but on the other roads?
Actually, I looked at both Queen Street and Nimitz because I
Okay.
started down Queen and then I diverted myself.
Okay.
I'm in a motorcycle, so I could.
Okay,
At
okay.
the
Well, I
time,
didn't know
could
that
turn
about
around
you. Okay.
fast. Well, hey, you live in downtown or Kaka'ako, a motorcycle makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah.
But I've dealt with enough traffic reports to know level of service F when I see it. Traffic was not flowing well at all. This is a disaster. Now,
Well, if you add a lot of people, it's going to have an effect. So the question is, what does the master plan say about resolving that issue? As opposed, in addition to all the other infrastructure type issues, how does the plan propose to deal with problems that are existing and are likely to be enhanced going forward?
Actually, I was just thinking about that last night, and I pulled up. Now, this could have been superseded along the way by some other tweaks here, but I pulled up the environmental assessment. And just if anybody wants to pull this up, and you grab the executive summary to the environmental assessment, it talks about the mitigation measures that would be necessary to deal with the population and growth in the area by 2030. And so they're talking about specific intersections, Kapiolani Boulevard and Pensacola Street, retain the existing one-way couplet between Pensacola and Pi'ikoi. Okay, no change basically. You go on to Kapiolani and Pi'ikoi, retain, no change. Signalized intersection of Ward Avenue and Halikuila, no feasible mitigation measure available. Insufficient right-of-way to accommodate modifications to roadway and intersection geometry to mitigate this impact. Go on to Ward Avenue and Queen Street, no feasible mitigation again. We're stuck, okay?
Can they explain, did they justify these conclusions? It sounds like it needs for them to say why.
Well,
They think that Kaka'ako can develop without any changes.
they're basically saying that there's no feasible mitigation because they don't have the right of way. If you're bumping up against buildings, if you're bumping up against owned space, well, what are you going to do? Say, well, we're going to take the sidewalk to stick in an extra lane? There are limits here. So in the big intersections, Ward and Queen, Ward and Halikuila, no feasible mitigation here. Insufficient right-of-way to accommodate modifications to roadway and intersection geometry to mitigate this impact. So I don't see a lot of mitigation there. Now, when they get to the all-way stop of Halikuila and Cook Street and the similar all-way stop intersection of Pohukaina and Cook Street.
All-way, you mean four-way stop intersections?
Right. They're basically saying signalize those two intersections. So, for the addition of additional population amounting to a growth of amounting to 500% of the existing population, the discussion in the environmental assessment was we're going to signalize two intersections.
By the way,
I
mean,
would
if you,
say
all
that
you got to
that's a
do is go
problem.
down there and take a look at Pohukaina and Cook, and it's a four-way stop sign situation. It is not adequate. It hasn't been adequate for at least a year, maybe two. And that should have been done a long time ago, and you wonder why in the ordinary course, forget about development now, they didn't put some signals down there. But to say that signals for those intersections are going to help, I mean, that's not going to help very much.
We've got the same amount of traffic going through the same pipeline, basically. We're just making it a little bit more polite and not necessarily more efficient. We're probably more efficient at rush hour when you need the signals, probably less efficient at other times.
Yeah. Charlie, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
That's Charlie Willson. He's a ThinkTech host. Yeah, he runs Island Perspective here on Monday afternoon at 4 to 5. And we're talking today about a subject that is in the news a lot. It's about the development of Kaka'ako. In fact, we did a movie on it, which is playing on OC16 right now, Finding Our Future in Kaka'ako, How to Assuage the Concerns. And we're talking about the Kaka'ako Master Plan. And it's a long discussion, I would say. This is a discussion we have to keep on having. Anyway, we'll be right back after this break. I'm Jay Fidell of ThinkTech. This is Island Perspectives with Charlie Willson, who is actually the host, but I'm hosting Charlie, so Charlie can be the guest, because his guest didn't show up today, but he knows a lot, so we're talking to him anyway. And we're talking about Kaka'ako, Finding Our Future in Kaka'ako, How to Assuage the Concerns, which is actually the name of our OC16 show this week. But he's talking about, and we are talking about, the Kaka'ako Master Plan update, which was actually written, for HCDA, and which will be discussed in some detail at the, quote, town meeting, which I find an interesting term, the town meeting, on Tuesday, July 30th, is it, at 5:30 p.m. in the State Capitol Auditorium, which I also find interesting that it should be in the State Capitol Auditorium, because this is not, this is nowhere near Kaka'ako. But anyway,
Well, it's close
it
enough.
is a state agency, I suppose that works.
It's walking distance.
It's walking distance. So, Charlie, you were explaining about the master plan, such as it is. Why don't you take a little more time on that, and then we should talk about how this is all going to evolve or be changed. You know, after the town meeting, as a consequence of the conversation between the concerned community members and the developers and HCDA as the state agency responsible.
Well, just to finish off what what we were talking about on traffic here, the conclusion they came to that you can find in the executive summary to the environmental assessment, which again was done in 2008, so there may have been some changes, and we'll find out more about that at the town meeting. But basically they said the implementation of the proposed mitigation measures being 2 signalized intersections. You're going to put signals at 2 non-signalized intersections. The proposed mitigation measure would lower the level of adverse impacts to less than significant. I would take issue with that statement. Less than significant. You're going to have 5 times the existing population and put in 2 traffic lights, and that's going to mitigate the impact. Now, for the other intersections that they're not able to deal with, they said the level of adverse impacts will continue to remain significant and unavoidable. This is a problem here. I mean, you put in that many additional people. I mean, you're going to have 500 times the population. These people still have to get to Safeway to buy their groceries. Now, yeah, you can probably
You don't
put
mean
some
500, you mean 5 times.
5 times, 500%.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry. People still have to get to and from work. They still have to get to and from school.
Well, how does this play with this whole notion of complete streets, which is talking about pedestrian, which is talking about bicycle, which is, talking about making it into a neighborhood that where people don't drive so much. I'm not sure how that works exactly. I think it may be difficult to actually achieve that because people do take their cars. These condominiums will have parking lots. There will be cars. So although they may, do recreational walks in the neighborhood, buying their groceries is still going to take a vehicle of some kind, I think.
Well, it's a great vision, okay? The idea of having a neighborhood where most things are within walking distance. I mean, that is appealing to a lot of people. I mean, it would appeal to me, I think, to be able to go a block or so and hit a drugstore and get my groceries close by and such. It may be that something could be worked out so that you can have a cart that you can carry from your building or bring from your building and bring back.
And that grocery that store will be at the TOD. In other words, right near the rail station.
That's the idea.
Which is on Hollywood Street.
Right, and the other possibility is that they can hop on the train and go and pick up groceries that way, within limit. What would fit in a backpack probably. So
well, most people don't do that at all. They go out and really buy lots of food in any given.
Right. That would perhaps require some adjustment here, but there are other possibilities. One of the things that I would look at as being an interesting possibility is if you're looking at this kind of density, they're looking at avoiding the same number of cars in the area. So they're looking at putting up units that don't have the same amount of parking. So what would happen perhaps if you were to take some electric cars and station these in the building so that nobody, these are owned perhaps by your building association as such. So you go down, you swipe your credit card and grab an electrical vehicle.
Car share.
Right. So you'd be taking the electric vehicle just to do your shopping, just to run your errands. You'd be coming back. When you plug it back in, then it takes you off the clock and just charges you for the time you've used. And if there's a problem, they know who had it because you had to swipe your credit card to get it. So, I mean, there are some future options that I look at as having significant advantages, and that would definitely be one of them. Cutting the cars, cutting the fumes from traffic, that's a big deal. However, most people are probably going to be slow to give up their cars. Most people are not going to want to totally divorce themselves from a personal vehicle. I think that's just part of our psyche.
Well, certainly part of Hawaii. I mean, Hawaii is very car-centric, and it's hard to imagine people who can afford an expensive apartment not having a car with them so they can sort of get out of town. I can't imagine anybody just living in that neighborhood and walking and riding bike and never getting out of town.
You want to go out and you want to go to the beach on the weekend, or you want to
whatever
go out
it is,
you want to go out and do whatever your particular sport. You may want to go and play a round of golf. You may want to just go sightseeing. You may
the train isn't going to help you much.
For a lot of that, no. So most people are still going to want to have their personal vehicles until we find a way around that. Now, to me, the possibilities afforded by having rentable electric vehicles, that's a new area that I think that we should be exploring more. And I think the people who are doing the electric cars right now probably, that would make really good sense for them to look at how they would be able to put that into buildings and get the buildings to buy into that. Same thing perhaps with electric mopeds
Or bicycles, yeah.
Bicycles
I
would
just
be
came back
great.
from a trip to New York, and right there across the street from Grand Central Station is this bike share thing, and room for hundreds of bikes, and a good percentage of them were gone every day, being ridden in the middle of Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, where the traffic is really heavy. Ordinary people riding bicycles.
If you can upgrade your streets so that the bicycle riding is safe,
You mean
then
like
I think
bike lanes?
Yes, good bike lanes. I mean,
yeah.
intersections that are designed so that the bike traffic can flow through. Personally, from having traveled on a bicycle, I mean, I'm not adverse to risk. I drive a motorcycle much more than I drive a car. I like to jump out of airplanes. I do things that other people consider risky, but driving a bicycle in traffic, that's a little bit above my normal risk tolerance. I've come too close too many times.
Well, what it sounds like, Charlie, is this master plan. It's a start for the conversation, but there's a lot of concerns that people have already expressed, and they probably will express additional concerns. And they'll have a town meeting, and hopefully the people who have the power to listen, the power to create a special neighborhood that will answer all these concerns and actually spend a little money doing that, that those people will be listening and taking heed by the concern, assuaging the concerns, if you will, and offering the possibility of a neighborhood that will actually satisfy the community. And that's, this is an interesting process. And you got to give credit to the people who organized the meeting. We'll see how they conduct the meeting. I'm sure you're going to go. I feel strongly that you're going to go. I feel that.
I
feel
intend
that
to
in
be
my
there.
bones,
Yeah.
right? So what do you think is going to happen? We got a couple of minutes. What do you think is going to happen?
First of all, I think one of the prime points to look at here is your legislators want to hear from you, especially if you're a downtown Kaka'ako resident right now. If you're going to be, if you live in this area, if you pass through the area, if you work in the area, whatever, your legislators want to know what you think, and they're looking for some guidance here. Thomas Jefferson said, democracy requires an informed and educated population. People need to be informed about this. So this is a really good opportunity to get informed about what's happening here. These are long-term changes, and when you make these kind of changes, they're basically, they're permanent. I mean, you look at where they put the Colosseum up in Rome, all your traffic is oriented around that right now. When you make big changes, even though something may disappear 100 or 200 years in the future here, you have redesigned your city, your infrastructure around those changes. Right now we're talking about a rail system, and we're talking about big changes in Kaka'ako. Now, if I put on my other hat here and play the devil's disciple here for a second. On the other hand, when you talk about a rail system, you don't necessarily have to have your population all in the city center. If you're talking about a high-capacity rail, you can move these people out of the population center and still have the advantages of getting them into work efficiently. So, although we're designing this around the rail system, part of me is questioning, is it really necessary that we put them all downtown in Kaka'ako, between downtown and Ala Moana? We're talking about 450 acres that will have a population that is far greater than the existing area.
You know, the tallest building there is just about 700 feet. And for comparison, I think that's about the same height as Diamond Head already. And for comparison, the tallest buildings there now, the waterfront tower buildings, are only 400 feet. So this is almost double almost double. It's going to be very dense. Well, you know what this suggests is that the most important thing right now is the process, because we are not only carving a new neighborhood, not only designing, a new city, if you will, we're also designing a new process where people can come together, have town hall meetings, express themselves, and where government really feels that it has to abide by the will of the people who speak. And that process will govern not only how Kaka'ako is developed, but anything in the state as we reach forward into the 21st century with other, dense developments elsewhere.
I think that's really the key point, and I think that's what people should be focusing on, and that should be the takeaway here.
Yeah,
okay, This is a process where we the people, basically, we hire people to do our bidding, and these are at all levels of government. We have hired people to see that this is done right. Okay, now, we are entitled to be involved in this process, okay? A lot of people, they don't want to be bothered, and I understand that, okay? Let somebody else make the decision. But if this is important to you as a citizen, then you should get yourself informed, and you should let your legislators know exactly what you want to see out of this. Personally, I'd like to see some more information here. I am very much concerned about things like traffic density, and are you going to be able to drive through these areas here, or is this just going to become another big parking lot where we have cars belching fumes and polluting the air even further here?
Yeah, you're a lucky guy.
How's that?
Because you're the host of Island Perspectives. And although your guest didn't show up today to discuss the Kaka'ako Master Plan update, there'll be other guests, Charlie, and I feel certain that you're going to cover this topic again and maybe again after that.
We have several city council people and legislators who are interested in hearing from you, and will probably be in here to
Bring him on, Charlie. That's Charlie Willson. He's the host of Island Perspectives, our 4 to 5 p.m. show here on the ThinkTech series. And we've been talking with Charlie today about the Kaka'ako Master Plan update and the town meeting, which is going to take place at the Capitol building, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, July 30th. Hope you'll be there. Thanks very much. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank
Aloha.
you, Jay.